Do School Better, a podcast for people who want to transform education. My name is Doris. In this season, I discuss the core principles of my educational philosophy with Tim Desmond and Allison Tanker, my co-teachers from Hawken School's Entrepreneurial Studies program. It's not about what you teach, it's about what they learn.
In this episode, Doris describes the Hawken Entrepreneurial Studies class from the student perspective. She explains how the style of learning by doing is different than traditional school and how collaboration plays a critical role in students' growth.
Take me through a challenge and what the students are actually doing day to day, at night, assignments, those sorts of things.
Okay. So is it okay if I pick a specific one? It's easier for me to.
Good.
So one of the semesters, our first business was an Indian fast casual restaurant here in Cleveland named Chula. And they were opening the restaurant for the first time in a few months. And the challenge for the students was develop a how to win Cleveland and then the rest of the world plan for Chula. And Chula is a wonderful, wonderful restaurant with a very unique concept where they both serve delicious, amazing food, but also really want to mainstream Indian food and culture in the American market. And they're doing so anyway, that was the first challenge. The students walk into the first day of class and they know this is going to be a strange class, but they have no idea what to expect. And in the first couple days, we take them through some experiences where they learn some things by doing. For example, some design thinking challenges. We have them do their first present. They're going to be presenting a lot in the class. Mm-hmm. They're going to be using the business model canvas a lot in the class. So we have an exercise in the first couple days where they present a business of their choosing that they either really know well or really like in a 3 to 4 minute presentation to the rest of the class using the business model canvas. So we don't lecture on the business model canvas. We give them something to read at night that describes the business model canvas. We tell them there are almost endless numbers of YouTube videos of people presenting businesses using the business model canvas. So go to town, do what you need to do, research your business, and tomorrow you're going to be presenting your business using the business model canvas, and we give them some instructions about that. So in the first 2 days, they are getting thrown in to presenting to everybody. We, in the first couple of days, say things like, you can't get an A by yourself, which they'll come to understand over time. We talk about, one of the lines I have is, if your feelings get hurt easily, get over it. And we talk about what the kind of feedback is, what the importance is of the feedback they're going to get, et cetera. So they're thrown in immediately into what turns out to be a very uncomfortable space. Instead of coming into a class, sitting at a desk, knowing that for the first few days you can just kind of sit there and have the teacher lead, they're having to perform in front of their peers and teachers the minute they walk in the door, right out the gate. And they don't have a textbook for this business model presentation. So they're also learning right out the gate what it means to have a deadline and an assignment and no instructions or recipe or textbook, but having to do your own research and figure out, okay, what are the most important questions I have that I better figure out between now and then, and how do I do this? And coming in and presenting things and doing things that you're not really equipped to do well. You're just not. I mean, we tell them you're going to be pretty miserable at this. You have no experience with the business model canvas. You don't really have a lot of experience with business. That's okay. You'll learn, and we expect that. Mm-hmm. So it's really a kind of crazy couple days. In fact, we have this student's blog. Their first blog is about the first couple days, and we have some very kids who are really shaken up. I mean, they're really off. So there's a lot of other things, in terms of the experiences we put them through and what we have them do. But basically, the third day of class, or fourth at the latest, mm-hmm. depending on the schedule, they're taken to their first business problem. So people are often asking, what do you do to prepare them? Right?
Yes.
What do you do to prepare them to work on a real business problem? And the answer is nothing. And the learning comes from having to solve it right. with a deadline. And if we were to prepare them for it, that's what school looks like.
Mm-hmm. Right, standing up in front of the room, saying, here's what to expect, here's what you need to do, here's the recipe, here's the answers in the back of the book.
Yeah, and again, in this particular class, they learn a lot about business as a byproduct of all this. But whatever it is, whether it's an entrepreneurship class, a history class, a math class, whatever it is, this isn't intended to be an MBA squeezed into a semester. So you have certain learning objectives. There's skills, and they're huge, and there's also knowledge they have to learn, and you figure out how they're going to get those. And depending on the class, both may be different. But although I'd argue most of the skills we're talking about are those core foundational necessary skills, problem solving, etc. Anyway, so that's the first couple of days. Then they're thrown into the business on the third day. And here's what's happening. In the first few weeks of the class, because this is all new to students, they're getting assigned a lot. And the reason they're getting assigned a lot is they have to, in order to be able to come up with anything substantive, they have to learn some very basic things about market research, about customer development, about how to interview well, about some basic foundational things for problem solving. Mm-hmm. They have to learn some very basic things about teamwork and collaborating well. They have to be, we have them, there's a bit of a writing boot camp. They're going to be writing a lot, not only writing things that just the teacher reads, but they're going to be writing things that are blogs that anybody can read. They're going to be emailing CEOs. They're going to be emailing strangers hoping they get a response. Mm-hmm. So they have a lot to learn very, very quickly. So there's that stuff. They're getting tons of assignments early on. In the meantime, they're also, as for their team in particular is they're assigning themselves their own work. So there's also stuff every night that the team,
depending on where they are in the problem solving,
they have to learn.
Specific.
So that's right. So in the case of Chula, they have to learn a lot about the demographics in Cleveland, right? They then have to learn about fast casual industry. They have to learn about, actually in the case of Chula, they had quite a bit of learning to do about Indian culture and Indian food. They had to learn about what the landscape for not only Indian food but ethnic foods looks like across the United States. They had to learn some economic stuff because Chula has a certain average price point per meal. It's not, so all kinds of stuff. So they're learning about customer development. They're watching Steve Blank's Udacity videos so that they're every night doing 1 or 2 sections to learn the foundation of lean startup. They're learning about how to interview well, and we're putting them through workshops to have them learn that, because it's not.
And they do that during the day, or?
Yeah, they do that during class. But you know, as a teacher, it's a very tricky thing. So whether you have bigger blocks of time like we have now, or you're teaching it in a 3-week after-school program, or you're teaching it as an elective and it's one of 6 classes over the course of a semester, it's really tricky, because you have to think about what is the most important thing for them to do during the class time versus what they can do outside of class on their own. And we're actually fairly religious about a few things. For example, at Hawken, we're very fortunate. We have an amazing alum base and parent base and a lot of very successful people. And I am very happy to report it's been a crazy, supportive, wonderful school and community. And very often people will offer to come, very successful, wonderful people with lots to teach will offer to come and talk to the students. And I have a policy, and I say, I'm so grateful that you're supportive, and I'd love to have you on call when we need you, but we don't have anyone come in and talk to the students because they can watch Bill Gates at night. And what they can't do at night is work with each other. So what you really get very careful about is what these students are doing in class. So one of the things also that a student experiences is that when they come into class, they learn the importance of using that time well. And they initiate it. The other thing I haven't mentioned that is a very important part of the class is the way we start class every day. We start class every day with something we call News Circle. And on the very first day of class, I say to students, find a news source, it doesn't matter what it is, that you'll follow every day, a daily changing news source. So if you're really into music, it can be a music blog, whatever. And on any given morning at News Circle, I may say, Allison, what's new? And I'd like to hear not what was new a week ago, but what was new the night before. And then I'll say, why is that interesting? And Allison will say, why that's interesting. And at the beginning of the class, in the first several days, students stand in News Circle and are reluctant to talk, and you saw this happen. But over time, as students listen to each other, as I listen to Allison bring up something that she found interesting from her music blog, even though I'm not interested personally in music. And there's a conversation that happens. And increasingly, the work we're doing for Chula and the things that we're learning and coming across start coming into the News Circle, and there are connections that the students are making between external systems and the problem that they're working on, their world, the world outside. What happens is increasingly these students are dying to bring up their news and talk about why it's interesting, and they feed off each other, and before you know it, someone's bringing up a news story, and it goes around without the teacher saying anything, and by the time they're done with what started as a music story, it's a story about the politics surrounding the immigrants. I mean, you just have no idea. But one of the things many of our students say, and it happens in those first few weeks, is that they start to becomes habit forming to stay on top of what's happening in the world and care and be interested and converse about it.
Sure.
And that lasts forever. So,
and therefore it sounds like the way you do set up class is quite intentional, that you're not just throwing a problem in the room. You set out some time in the beginning of class for the news circle, which also acts as a check-in for where they're at with the problem. And then they're released and they go into their team time. They go and do their own work that is self...
So it depends on what you're doing and where they are. Mm-hmm. And we have very different things, but there's definitely, you have to make a lot of room for them to, what we call team time, for them to work in teams. But it's a challenge as a teacher, because you have this much time, whatever it is, and you have to balance. We need to do a workshop so that they learn how to interview well, with they need to have time to work as a team. There's a learning management system that Tim developed that is totally in Google, and they have to learn also how to navigate outside of class and in class with a variety of resources.
Having a virtual workplace and utilizing tools like that to really create together, whether they're in or out of class.
Right. They learn how to manage projects. They use Todoist to keep track of their group, their team to-do list, and who's assigned what, and deadlines and completion.
Which we can see to kind of overview where they're at in the process and what they might need help with.
Right. We assign subject matter related videos and articles, although that's a whole different topic in terms of what you assign and how you decide that and when, because you really want them to be chasing the research. But there's also different stages in the problem where they need to be at a certain place, and the assignments reflect that. So if you have, in our case with the current course, we're talking about 3-week units for each business. But if you have a 5-week unit, there's a certain time when they need to have gotten to a certain place. And so how you guide them through that is pretty developed.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Do School Better. We would love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment or a review. And if you're interested in learning more, check out wildfire-education.org.